Let's now cross to my colleague Khayelihle Khumalo, who is at the Sandton Convention Centre. Khayelihle, earlier I spoke to Natasha Piri. She gave us her view in terms of what is happening. Give us a sense of what is happening and what we are looking at an international front.
Well, that's right, Unati. So it is indeed a very watershed moment for South Africa. We know that for the longest time, the impact of COVID-19 where quite a number of people are not able to come to South Africa. In fact, just a short while ago, we spoke to Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, where she made it very explicitly clear that it is quite a challenge, the issue of crime, when she was on the charm offensive in Dubai and interacting with a number of investors. One of the main challenges that came across quite strongly was the issue of security in South Africa. So once again, it is an opportunity for the country to say, well, we are working on this challenge. We are addressing some of the impediments that are hindering investments in South Africa. But also, we spoke to the French ambassador here in South Africa. We do know that the issue of energy is quite a massive challenge for the country. The French ambassador said over 50 billion rand now has been pledged by over 20 French companies who are based in South Africa. So you're looking at making sure that you're boosting infrastructure, you're boosting tourism and many other important streams of the economy. But also something that has been welcomed by most of the investors has to do with the PCR test. That's now when you're coming to South Africa, really, if you're vaccinated, you don't really need to produce that particular test. So it comes really as a massive relief. But apart from that, it's really interesting to hear from the perspective of the investors who are warning us about the geopolitical tension between Russia and Ukraine as that conflict continues to unfold. A lot of them saying that we're talking about recovery, but that conflict really, negotiations should happen between the warring parties so that you're able to clear and be able to have an economy that is thriving across the world.
Kaya, of course, you're mentioning very important, factors, particularly what is happening in Eastern Europe. Talk to me about anything that came out of, ease of doing business in South Africa. Of course, South Africa has been criticized, for the lack of ease, if I can put it that way, in terms of doing business here. Has that been mentioned at all? Is that a deterrent? I mean, we know that the 1.2 trillion rands target, South Africa is well ahead, before meeting it in 2023, I believe they've already amassed more than 70% of that amount. But has that issue actually been raised during this conference?
Well, precisely, Nati, especially because a lot of the investors here, they're saying it's time for South Africa really to lead in terms of the continental projects like your African Continental Free Trade Area. So that's a starting point before we're able to leapfrog into other markets in terms of that particular side of Europe. So a lot of them really, they are concerned, but the message that is coming across is the continent really should gear up in terms of making sure that, for example, there's food security, especially around the issue of Ukraine being a very important market, especially around the wheat, but also with Russia being a very important energy sector player. So a lot of them, they are saying South Africa really should be at the forefront in terms of leading, in terms of making sure that the expertise are really just spread across the continent, especially with countries like Angola. We know that it's the third largest producer of crude oil. So if Russia really is not able to supply to the global market, so countries like Angola should really step up. So that's another very pertinent message that you're getting. But also others, for example, they do say that, well, South Africa is a very important player, especially when you look at the global politics, how South Africa has been leading mediation. Also is a strong player within the United Nations Security Council, where South Africa really can be very instrumental in terms of bringing Ukraine and Russia on the table, of course assisted by other parties as well. But a very clear message message also coming across from the investors is that they certainly do believe that South Africa is bankable, as much as it's really facing quite a litany of socioeconomic challenges, but there's still a very enormous potential.
And of course, those challenges are, as a result, what we are seeing now in the stagnant economy.